The inauguration stand is up and ready, but as the dome of the U.S. Capitol glistens in the winter sunlight, the world's most powerful nation on edge ahead of a transfer of power like none other in its 240-year history. Hi, everyone. I'm François Picard. Welcome to a special edition. We're in Washington all week for the inauguration of Joe Biden as the 46th President of the United States. Over the next hour, we're going to be asking about the impact of that January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump trying to stop the certification of the election. We're going to be asking him what lies ahead over the next 24 hours. Trump is still the president, and the challenges for a Joe Biden who has to hit the ground running, particularly when it comes to that COVID pandemic, which has killed 400,000 in the U.S. Now, all week, we're going to be in the company of France 24 International Affairs editor Douglas Herbert, who joins us now. Doug, just to set the table, if you will, tell viewers at home, because they can't see below here, what the scene is like.
Well, it's empty, first of all, Francois, aside from, some of the 21,000 plus National Guardsmen who've been deployed across this Capitol in lockdown, plus a lot of active duty troops as well. Aside from that, what's stunning about this scene is normally before an American presidential inauguration, you would have throngs of people milling around the mall. You would have a scene below, a rather festive scene, a celebration. There are no citizens down there right now. It is void of Americans. Instead, in front of that west front of the Capitol, where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in tomorrow, what you do have is a small sea of American flags. No Americans, but flags. 200,000 of them, flags to represent normally the number of people who are given invites. If this were an open ceremony, not coming in a time of national public health crisis, you would have each member of Congress given 1,000 or so invitations. You'd have hundreds of thousands of Americans assembled in that scene behind us below. This time, flags are taking their place in order to highlight what is seen as sort of a hallmark of American democracy, which is that peaceful transfer of power, taking on added significance this year.
Yeah, and by the way, while we wait on presidential pardons, what Donald Trump is going to do, when he's going to leave Washington on Wednesday before that inauguration.
Unprecedented, too.
There's still business going on in that building behind us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's going on right now are confirmation hearings. What's unusual about this incoming president is none of his cabinet members will have been confirmed, Francois, on the first day. He will basically still have a cabinet in the works of being confirmed. The hearings, which are held by the Senate, have gotten underway. That's a first order of business, and they have a lot of work to do to get some of those top national security appointees in place. It's no small task, given the extraordinary circumstances this year in which the Senate, in which the Congress, not the Senate yet, has been distracted by an impeachment trial in the run-up to this inauguration. They really haven't had that much time to get down to other business.
And that impeachment trial, when can we expect it?
Well, that's a $64,000, probably inflation, a little bit more, question, Francois. The problem is, typically, the House of Representatives, once they pass that impeachment article, which they've done, it's sent on to the Senate, and the Senate must begin work immediately. The problem is, if Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, were to send that article on today, the Senate impeachment trial would have to begin tomorrow. And the problem there is you have the prospect of a split-screen inauguration with, on the one hand, the 46th President of the United States taking the oath of office, as at the same time the Senate chamber is constitutionally obliged to start the trial to convict or not to convict the outgoing president.
And as Doug was saying, we're feeling the scars of that January 6th assault. Critics of the outgoing president say that he egged on the crowd not just over one day, but over 4 years. Monty Francis has more.
Our president has finally released a birth certificate.
Donald Trump's political career began with a simple lie, the racist conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. It sparked the birther movement, with scores of followers believing that Obama had been born in Kenya and was therefore an illegitimate president. a lie that persisted even after the former president publicly released his long-form birth certificate. There were also false claims about Trump's success as a businessman and his taxes. He claimed to have paid millions to the government and continued to do so, even after the New York Times revealed through records that he had paid nothing in federal income taxes for 11 out of 18 years, and in fact had received a disputed $73 million refund from Uncle Sam. Then came Pizzagate and QAnon, groups that took Trump at his word and spread their own dangerous conspiracy theories, accusing Democrats of running a human trafficking and child sex ring. Even after winning the election against Hillary Clinton in 2016, Trump falsely asserted that millions of illegal votes had been cast for his opponent. Exaggerations about the size of the crowds at his inauguration. The wall.
We're going to build the wall. Mexico's going to pay for the wall.
Admitting to downplaying the threat of the coronavirus with unfounded claims.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
In just one term, according to the Washington Post's fact checker, Trump has made more than 30,000 false or misleading claims. Many of Trump's supporters share his disdain for the media and invoke one of his favorite dismissives when they hear anything that contradicts him.
I've been watching the fake news for weeks now, and everything is negative.
But perhaps the most dangerous lie was one of his last.
We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election. Wow!
His personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, took Trump's claims of voter fraud to court and lost every case.
What we're telling you is supported by evidence.
Some of his followers believed blindly in the face of evidence to the contrary. It propelled a group of hardcore Trump loyalists and right-wing extremists to storm the Capitol as Congress was certifying Joe Biden's victory. With the inauguration of Joe Biden, the Capitol is again under threat and under the protection of the military. Meantime, millions of Trump's followers continue to believe that he won the election, a lie that Trump refuses to finally put to rest.
Yeah, France 24's team, which is not just in the U.S. Capitol, but monitoring events across the United States ahead of this inauguration day. Elisa Caverly joins us now from West Palm Beach in from Atlanta, Georgia. Excuse me, Atlanta, Georgia. We'll be going to West Palm Beach a little bit later on. Elisa, Georgia, one of these states that was a real signifier of this election. We saw the U.S. president try to lean on the Republican leadership there to reverse the result, to find him more votes, 11,000 of them plus. That didn't happen. It's what's deemed a purple state now, with Democrats and Republicans at odds. What's the feeling, though, when it comes to Georgia?
Right, so Georgia is one of the states that has been very tense over the past couple of weeks, especially because they just had a Senate race on January 5th. After Trump made the plea with the Secretary of State to get that 11,870 votes, to be exact, was the votes he was looking for on that phone call. And so just 3 days after that phone call, Republicans lost 2 Senate seats, which actually pushed the Democrats over the edge. So now the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. So there's a lot of tension, and there was a lot of tension here in Georgia, not only among politicians, but among voters as well. Now, one of the main reasons why Georgia turned the first time in 30 years was because of the black vote. 20% more, an increase in black votes this election compared to last election. And a politician by the name of Stacey Abrams was given a lot of credit for getting black voters to register and then also getting them to come out and actually vote. So there is a big change going on here in Georgia, and a lot of the Republican leaders, but also Republican voters, are not particularly happy about it. Now, like most of the capitals here in the U.S., Georgia has not had Atlanta, we're here in front of the Capitol building in Atlanta, sorry. Atlanta has not had any demonstrations, as we had assumed would potentially be happening on Sunday. So it has been peaceful here. It has been quiet. It's very quiet around the Capitol buildings. You see the National Guard standing behind me, and they are in place. They will be in place until Wednesday at the latest, potentially later. Of course, we still don't know what is going to happen on Inauguration Day, but so far here in Georgia, things are very calm.
Yeah, Lisa, you've been clocking up the air miles. You just arrived from Lansing, Michigan, another state capital where they had predicted a large turnout of those protesting the vote over the weekend, over the long Martin Luther King holiday weekend. And that petered out as well. I guess the question a lot of people in the United States are asking is it the end of something or the beginning of something?
That is a big question right now. I would say it's probably the beginning of something, but obviously I'm not sure. We see a lot of people who have been infiltrating these alt-right groups that obviously are no longer on the mainstream media platforms, right? They're no longer on Facebook. They're no longer on Twitter. They've gone farther and farther underground to have these discussions and to talk about what they want to do. And so a lot of the thoughts here is that they were going to do something. The FBI put out briefings warning, and obviously we have the National Guard and the police force here protecting all of the different capitals around the U.S. So a lot of them backed out. And so now we'll see what their long-term plans are, because the discussions have not stopped. Just because they didn't come out this weekend, a lot of people that we've talked to, other journalists who have gone online on these message boards that are very much underground, these discussions are still happening. And it's more of a long-term execution plan is what they are seeing. So again, it remains to be seen, especially Wednesday. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen on Inauguration Day. Hopefully things remain peaceful here at the different capitals around the U.S., but it really does remain to be seen. And obviously, officials on high alert, they will continue to be on high alert to make sure that things stay as peaceful as possible.
Things stay as peaceful as possible. Lisa Caverly reporting from Atlanta, Georgia. And our teams also were, over the long weekend, in another state capital that a lot of people were eyeing, Richmond, Virginia. It's a report by James Andre and Catherine Norris-Trent.
Convoys of pro-gun protesters hit the highways of Virginia, converging on the city of Richmond to defend gun ownership laws.
To protect our Second Amendment given rights.
Are you worried about the next 4 years?
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen?
Revolution!
These protesters, mostly ardent supporters of Donald Trump, are concerned about much more than guns alone.
In the next 4 years, I'm going to keep running that flag on the front of my truck. What do I think of Biden? He's a crook, is exactly what he is. He's defrauding the American people.
Long lines of vehicles joined the drive-through protest, but only a few hardline far-right groups chose to march through the center of town, where authorities had banned the carrying of firearms.
I'm delivering it back to its owners. That's what we think of that.
Any further gun legislation will be seen as an act of war. We're not going to stand for it. We peacefully protested, and peacefully protested. We'll defend ourselves when it comes down to it.
This is an annual event, but this year the police here braced for violence, even a full-scale assault on public buildings. But in the wake of the 6th of January, most protesters stayed away. The capital here in Richmond is fenced off, boarded up and under heavy guard, even though there's been no eruption of violence here today. There's no doubt, though, that the divisions in America remain very real and very raw. And the die-hard conservatives we spoke to say they have no intention of staying quiet for the next 4 years.
Yeah, these security issues which have dominated the news cycle really since January the 6th. Again, if you're just joining us on France 24, it's a special edition from the U.S. Capitol. And on the day before the inauguration of Joe Biden, we knew it was going to be, in any case, a scaled-down inauguration because of the COVID pandemic. But now we have this security perimeter below us. We're in what's called the green zone, and beyond that, there's the red zone. It went off quietly there. We saw over the weekend in those places we reported on, Lansing, Michigan, and also in as we just saw, in Richmond, Virginia. We'll be crossing live to Catherine Norris Trent in just a short moment. Right now, at this time, we're going to bring on. Yeah, come on in. Come on in. We're going to bring on and say hello to Eric Bjornlund. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Very delighted to be here. Thank you.
Professor, here, take a microphone. COVID oblige.
Thank you so much.
Professor at Georgetown University, but also you are the head of, get my notes correctly here, the co-founder of Democracy International, right, and the author of the book Beyond Free and Fair, Monitoring Elections and Building Democracy. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Of course not. No, it's extraordinary and very troubling, but this is the situation we find ourselves in.
What? I mean, it would have been scaled down anyways, right? Right now, the question we've been asking ourselves is, Americans believe in the exceptionalism of their democracy, right? That it's that the institutions that were agreed upon in the 18th century are somehow immortal and forever. Did you believe that before January 6th?
We always recognized, I think those of us who paid attention and those of us in the international democracy promotion community recognized the limitations of American democracy, the flaws in the institutional arrangements, but we certainly thought there was a basic commitment to democratic principles, and those are really in question now.
Now, you've covered countless elections throughout the world, everywhere from Pakistan to Kenya, El Salvador. Can you be a credible U.S. election monitor after what's just happened?
Well, it will certainly be harder. It certainly calls into question the U.S. sense of itself as a model for the world. We always, in the American democracy community, recognized that there were flaws in the U.S. system and that we weren't selling the U.S. model or the U.S. arrangements. We were trying to encourage universal values and promote those, and that'll still be true. But on the other hand, we clearly have a lot of work to do in the United States to pay attention to our own election system and our own serious threats to democracy.
What we've witnessed with Donald Trump, and we're going to witness more of it before he leaves office, first time since 1869, when an outgoing president is not attending the inauguration. Is there the sense that this is just the normal pendulum swings of U.S. history, or are we headed towards something we've never seen before?
I think we're at risk of heading towards something that we've never seen before. I mean, we're in the midst of something we've never seen before. We have the situation where 74 million people voted for President Trump, despite what we knew about his record and the lies and the problems. And now we have the one major political party having a substantial part of that party willing to try to overturn the results of a democratic election. That's clearly a problem, right? Time will tell whether we can overcome that. But that's the kind of challenge to democracy that we've not seen before.
Is the impeachment trial important?
It's very important. Accountability for what has happened, particularly with the mob overrunning the U.S. Capitol, is really, really important. We have to have a political response to say that kind of political rhetoric is unacceptable, and unfortunately impeachment is a critical part of that kind of accountability.
And what do you say to the 139, I believe it was, who even after the Capitol had been stormed was still trying to decertify the result?
It's very disappointing. We know that those members of Congress felt political pressure to do that, and they felt that was in their political interests. Unfortunately, that didn't show much courage. I think we need to our political system needs to make pariahs of the people who were out in front of that, the people that incited the insurrection, basically, and really moved aggressively to overturn the elections. That includes, as many people have commented, Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley and the majority leader of the Republicans in the House.
Should they be kicked out of the Senate?
They won't be. That would be certainly worth considering. But they should become really heavily criticized for that. They shouldn't be treated as responsible leaders of a political party.
So, Eric Bjorlund, I'll ask you what, I guess the question you probably ask yourself every time you set out on those trips across the globe. What do you do to strengthen democracy in the United States?
Well, it's going to be a long slog and a long process. Some of the things that we need to do are really long term. They require constitutional reforms because we have a set of institutional arrangements in our Constitution that go back many, many years, and we have not been able to reform them over time and to make incremental changes. But there's a lot of things we can do and we need to do in the short term. Institutional reforms are really important. Things changing our election system, improving how we have more impartial election administration, fighting racism, basically, and trying to ensure that the society comes together behind the idea that we shouldn't allow voter suppression and allow the continuing effects of institutionalized racism in this country. So it's going to be a long process, and I guess especially important is being concerned about disinformation. So we need to help people to understand what the truth is and to learn about that. So none of those things will be easy, and they'll clearly be the kinds of things that happen over a long period of time. But we need to start now.
That fight against disinformation is a rethink, right, of the media landscape in the United States and the use of social media, the internet. What's acceptable is when it comes to free speech. Is a 78-year-old president up to the task?
Well, I think so. I think we in the United States have been lucky now to have probably the right person for the time, and I think all the signals from the new administration are positive. There is concern about restoring democracy. We, of course, have the crises of the pandemic and the economic crisis, but we also have this democracy crisis. But the new administration knows that, and I think they're going to be doing what they can to do their part.
Is there a link between the pandemic and what happened on January the 6th?
Hard to know. I'm no public health expert. Certainly, the fact that people have been so affected in their lives over the last almost a year has not helped. The pandemic is certainly not helped. So it's certainly been a contributing factor to the way people feel about the situation.
So, what needs to happen in the first 100 days?
Focusing on the democracy challenge and not as much on the economic and pandemic challenges. We need to ensure accountability for what happened in the mob riot. There needs to be the perpetrators need to be held to account. So we need to find the people that were involved in it and arrest them and prosecute them appropriately. Secondly, there needs to be a real effort to find how it happened, whether there were people or organizations that coordinated it and organized it and intended for that to happen, and hold them accountable. We need to figure out how the Capitol Police wasn't prepared for it, why the National Guard was apparently slow. And thirdly, there needs to be political consequences. We need to follow through with the impeachment process and try to ensure that the people that were behind it are not able to run away from that and just hide behind calls for unity. So those are the kind of short-run things, and then we need to work on, as I was saying, institutional reforms. We need to make our system better, and there are things that can be done by legislation, there are things that can be done by education, and ultimately there are things that will require constitutional amendments to really improve the system.
All right, and one final question. Can it happen, that democracy challenge, you say, with a U.S. Senate splitting its time, probably? Because if you have that trial that you call for, of that impeachment trial, it means that they'll be doing half days of work on the pandemic and whatever else legislation there is, and half days of Senate trials for weeks on end?
Well, it's certainly not what you would have wanted to happen, but it has to happen that way. I mean, it's essential for the the accountability to go forward and for the other important agendas of the country to go forward. And I think our political system will be challenged, and we'll see what they can do. But I think everybody will be trying, and we hope that responsible leaders of the Republican Party will join with the Democratic Party in trying to make sure that we address the accountability challenge, the democracy challenge, as well as the other problems that the country faces.
All right, Eric Bjorlund, I want to thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you so much on France 24.
Thanks so much.
The challenges that we've been talking about, and really Eric Bjorlund highlighting how you really have two Americas. It's something, again, that Catherine Norris-Trent, you saw her report earlier from Richmond, Virginia, has witnessed firsthand. Catherine, you're back in Washington. Before I ask you where you are, just a reminder to our viewers here, Richmond is just 2 hours away in Virginia.
Yeah, that's right. Just 2 hours away when traffic is good, but it really does seem like another world coming at it with an outside look. In any case, you know, it's a parallel reality. People saying there openly, Biden is not my president. People we spoke to, Republican supporters, gun rights activists, member of some of these militias we've seen at demonstrations in the past, saying that they didn't think the vote was free and fair, despite the fact that there's been no proof offered, despite the fact that, you know, the 60-something legal cases have not come up with anything, still believing that there wasn't transparency in the election, that there was at least some degree of fraud. That seems to be among this population pretty much of a given now. And then we asked the question, so if that is your view, what do you intend to do about it? And this is where we got different responses, Francois. Some people saying, look, you know, I didn't like it, but I'm going to accept it. I'm going to get more politically involved. Others saying they are going to continue with civil disobedience. And, you know, some of the far-right extremist groups saying, I'm going to leave that to your imagination. That will be worse than the 6th of January to come. So really is another world. It does seem like light years away from D.C.
And you have to cross, of course, the Civil War battlefields when you go from Washington to Richmond, where many of the battles took place. When you describe the people you speak to, do you get the sense that it's a fringe or that this represents a broader spectrum of the population?
Well, it's a really interesting question because the Lobby Day rally we attended in Richmond, Virginia is an annual event. It's been taking place since 2002. And last year, the organizers told us they saw 22,000 people turning up. Impossible to verify those figures at this stage, but we saw nowhere like those numbers turning up at that protest. A lot of the people were kind of doing a drive-through protest, so we saw quite a large number of vehicles, you know, with gun rights flags, Trump banners, etc., driving through Richmond and then heading off again from all four corners of Virginia. But people actually walking around the city centre in breach of the guns, the firearms carry ban, which had been put in place around the Capitol. You know, there really weren't that many, and there were these members of these very hardline, far-right extremist groups, and there weren't that many of them out on the streets. But again, we have to ask ourselves the question about the timing, and after the 6th of January and that siege on the Capitol, how many people are willing to come out and defy the authorities and protest at the moment? And then you've got to look at some of the messages which have been circulating in the right-wing online sphere at the moment, with some people saying, look, any protests planned for before inauguration are a trap. Lots of conspiracy theories around that. People saying they're not willing to come out because they don't want to be identified by the FBI. They don't want to get in trouble with authorities. Look, the numbers weren't big at these protests, and they haven't seen them materializing across the U.S. at various protests. I think we're going to have to wait and see in the time after this inauguration whether there is a groundswell of popular support for any kind of direct action.
And just before I let you go, tell us where you are now.
So we're back in D.C. We got in just before the road bridges closed from Virginia at 6 a.m. this Tuesday. We're kind of just at the entrance to the the security perimeter here in downtown D.C., just a couple of blocks away from the White House. And you can see there behind me, that is one of the checkpoints that you have to come through with your Secret Service security clearance if you are indeed allowed outside. At this point, it's only pedestrians allowed here. A lot of it's been fenced off, and there are restaurants behind me on the other side, which you can see have barricaded up, put wooden boards over their windows, preparing for any potential chaos. So this is very much the scene in downtown DC. It's very surreal, it's deserted, and it's pretty eerie, really, and people just really waiting to see what happens and hoping, a lot of them in DC, that this passes off peacefully.
All right, Catherine Norris-Trent will be reporting live throughout. And again, we're less than 24 hours from Joe Biden becoming the next president of the United States. And it really feels, standing where I am, that I'm in the most secure place in the United States. It's a report by Fanny Allard and Kedevan Gorgestani.
The nation's capital has become a fortress, with more than 20,000 members of the National Guard, as well as both federal and metropolitan law enforcement forces from across the District of Columbia out on the streets. Downtown Washington is eerily still.
Here in the district, things seem to be calming down. The environment is fluid, but at the same time, we're very confident in our ability to respond to anything.
Been on several missions before. Nothing quite like this per se. I did respond to riots in the past in Baltimore, but I've never seen anything to the scale of this, or at least the amount of troops moving here. In the nation's capital, no, I never foresaw this.
Widely criticized for its handling of the January 6th attack, the U.S. Capitol Police is now armed and on high alert, a display of law enforcement that has reassured many D.C. residents.
Thank you all. God bless you.
Even the Secret Service, usually tasked with protecting the President of the United States and other top officials, is on hand to help secure the area.
It's very sad. They should have been more ready and alert last week, of course, and that's a great mystery and very disturbing. So I have very mixed feelings.
The last time I saw soldiers here was at 9/11, when we were under attack from a foreign country. Now there's more soldiers here now than in Afghanistan, and it's because a group of Americans have attacked us.
There are now more troops in Washington, D.C. than in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria combined, a sign that authorities are taking the threat of a new domestic attack very seriously.
Well, joining us, a man who knows a thing or two about places like Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Michael Pregin, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, former intelligence officer. Great to meet you in the flesh.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Usually you're on a line and I'm in Paris. Anyway, thanks so much for being with us. Yeah, does it feel like Baghdad?
It feels like the international zone. This is what you would go through in Baghdad if you were traveling from one side of the compound to the other side. You'd go through numerous checkpoints, and it's sad to see the capital this way.
Is it overkill?
It's overkill.
What's it about then?
It's about sending a message. I think the same thing would have probably been done had Trump won the election. There'd be some safety measures. There'd probably be more protests out. But this is an overreaction because the people that support Trump, regardless of what they did a week ago, you can't label 74 million people that way, and you just weren't going to see that same type of reaction. I think it's an overreaction, but they are all doing their jobs out there, those military personnel, and it's the right thing to do. They have a mission, but I do think it'll be one of those missions that will prove to be unnecessary.
You, in your work, you have pushed for the American democracy. You've worked with, for instance, those trying to build democracy in places like Iraq. Donald Trump, did he take a wrecking ball to that democracy?
I think the country, to be honest with you, I think this is the first time in my 52 years of being part of this great experiment, the United States, where our adversaries have to be very happy about the situation in the United States right now. The Republican Party is fractured. The Democrat Party is fractured. It's being held together with smoke and mirrors. And this is a very tenuous time for the United States. I don't think Trump did this alone. I think there have been a lot of players that have basically given both Democrats and Republicans a lack of faith in institutions. And our adversaries should not believe that there are election outcomes that favor them.
the lack of faith in institutions, something that goes back a long time.
Right.
And we're seeing, the reports of the day's news, how they're doing background checks on those who are doing security. Is the U.S. a soft target in that sense, if we're going to speak military jargon?
I think if I'm an adversary, I would just sit back and wait and let this continue. The Democrats and the Republicans are at each other's throats. The Republican voter sent a message in Georgia to the establishment.
But is there a security problem? Like, can Joe Biden trust his own Secret Service? Can he trust his own military? Will they follow his orders?
He hired his own private security firm for the election tomorrow. He should trust the military. He should trust the police. That would be the right message to send Americans as you're trying to heal and trying to bring people together. The last thing you should show is distrust of these soldiers under the age of 30 that are out here away from home doing a mission. And you're hearing from some Democrats saying that they're worried that these National Guard soldiers might turn on the president-elect. And that kind of rhetoric is unnecessary. And it really helps our adversaries. Russia, China, Iran, even geopolitical competitors are sitting back and looking at this and saying, this is a sign. This is a sign of weakness in this country, and it could be exploited. But the good thing is when we are actually pushed by something tangible, the country will come together.
The country will come together, and you think back to what happened on January the 6th, and we saw, for instance, that woman who was shot dead during the exchange.
Yes.
She was an Air Force veteran, and her path seems to be the same kind of path that you and I have talked about, a path of radicalization, of disillusion turns to radicalization, going online too much. Is there any difference at all with the jihadists in other parts?
Well, here's something that I told General Petraeus in 2007. I said, the Sunnis believe we have a sectarian government in Baghdad. General Petraeus said, no, we don't. And I said, well, if they believe it, we still have to deal with it. There are Americans in this country that believe the election was stolen. There are Americans in this country that believe that the press is out to get them, that they're being silenced, that free speech doesn't mean anything if you're on one side of the aisle. And whether it's true or not, if they feel that way, you have to do something about it. And Republicans are telling them to be quiet, shut up, and go home. The media is telling them to be quiet, shut up, and go home. And the Democrats are now talking about canceling out, radio, canceling out what's left of Republican free speech.
What can Joe Biden do?
He can do what he said. He can come out tomorrow and say, hey, we're not going to label all Republicans this. We're not going to label 74 million Trump supporters this. He has said that, but then he wants to go ahead with impeachment. Impeachment means nothing for President Trump when he's a civilian. There's no legal status there at all for the Senate to do that to a civilian. They want to strip his Secret Service away. Now, the Iranians have said they want to take Trump out for killing Qasem Soleimani.
But, Michael, the whole world watched. There was a storming of Parliament that happened. This is not something to be underestimated.
It was embarrassing.
Donald Trump said, go to the Capitol.
If you look at the whole speech, he said, go there and do it peacefully and speak like an American. He didn't say attack the Capitol. He didn't say go in. If you listen to the speech, you'll hear him say that, and while he's saying do it peacefully, the Capitol's being attacked.
He said, we love you to those people afterwards.
This is no way, I'm not condoning what happened. It's an embarrassment. No, we had veterans that were in that crowd. We had off-duty police officers that were in that crowd. We had Republicans, and the majority of the 100,000 plus that were out there weren't storming the Capitol. They should be prosecuted, they should be arrested, all of those things should happen. But it needs to be applied the same way when somebody on the left does it.
Joe Biden has, on the campaign trails, and he's done it throughout his political career, stressed his attachment to the military and to military service. How do you project it? Can he do, like we were talking about earlier, what you were asking for, which is reaching across the aisle, making institutions like that sure that they're nonpartisan?
I think it's in his nature to do those types of things. I mean, Joe Biden was never considered somebody that was on the hard left. He was always considered the guy that could work across the aisle, and I hope he does that. But some of the rhetoric and some of the things you're hearing from people in his cabinet and in his would-be cabinet, the language isn't very good.
All right, and just talking a little bit now about the international stage.
Right.
We're in a Middle East that's in flux after Donald Trump. We're wondering, Joe Biden would like to go back to the Iran nuclear deal, but he obviously won't be able to go back to the way it was before. Do you see a window of opportunity ahead, or are you...
For the Middle East?
Yeah.
Well, I think that maximum pressure will actually work in the favor of Joe Biden. If the Biden team wants to renegotiate the Iran deal, they have the upper hand. The regime is hurting. Maximum pressure did work. It will bring them to the table, just like the 2012 sanctions did. The Obama administration said they came to the table on their knees, and this maximum pressure campaign will bring them back to the table on their knees. But you're hearing talk from the Biden administration to walk in without any preconditions. The JCPOA, the Iran deal, expires in 5 to 8 years. You have to renegotiate. You have to do it now. Those sunset clauses are going to run out. The arms embargo just ran out. Ballistic missiles run out in 2 years.
And speaking of running out,
right?
I know, as we've been quipping, Americans don't do half measures. We can see it by the presence below.
Right.
When is all this going to be packed and put away?
The day after. Well, there are some orders saying they're going to be here till March, and they're doing it in other cities to enforce some sort of lockdown for, coronavirus. But, again, we don't know what to believe at this point. They'll likely go home on the 20th without incident from D.C. They'll minimize their presence. There's no reason to have 3 bands of obstacles ahead in front of the Capitol in an empty city.
All right,
it's an empty city.
Michael Pregin, many thanks
thank you for
joining us.
Appreciate
and
it.
we want to thank you for joining us for this special edition. Much more coverage ahead of Inauguration Day. It's now a matter of hours. Thanks for being with us from Washington.
Good afternoon, folks. These are among the brightest, most dedicated people, not only in the country, but the world. They're composed of some of the most brilliant scientific minds in the world. We know the science is discovery. It's not fiction. It's also about hope. And that's America. It's in the DNA of this country, hope. We're on the cusp of some of the most remarkable breakthroughs that will fundamentally